going to. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another nSanity Check with Dr. Anita. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson. Give me a minute to contain myself and let me handle some housekeeping before we get into this show. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dr. Anita PhD, DoctoRanita PhD, so that you can get this broadcast and all of the other broadcasts. We are continuing the theme of the month, the Survivors Club, and it's surviving the scene, SEEN, which you can see, and surveying the scene, SCENE, which you cannot see. And in our first show, we did a discussion around the book entitled The Survivors Club, and the premise of the show was your faith in humanity. Excuse me, the premise of the book was your faith in humanity. I'm stumbling because we are at a pivotal point that proves that that man might be right in having faith in humanity. Crew, what did we each just find out on our cell phones? Crew, what did we just find out?
Joe Biden was elected president.
We have a new president. And there is a collective sigh of relief on the podcast right now. So who wants to jump in? I'm going to start with Shar, because Shar is the one who said, okay, my faith in humanity has been restored. Shar, what are you thinking? And then Eloy, and then Adrian.
I'm so overwhelmed with I feel like I actually might cry. This has been such an internal battle, I think, especially for myself, because I can see good in both sides. I can see good in both campaigns. But I wanted to be cohesive. I wanted us all to work together no matter what we agreed on. And so it was such a struggle to see people at such odds. So to be at this point now where just a decision has been made as a whole, as a collective, we have decided, just feels like, like go us. Now we can start doing the real work, no matter who's up there. Like we got this. Like I'm ready. I feel like now is go time. You thought getting here was go time. No, now is go time. My shoes are on, and I'm coming in with my 10%. I have no idea what to do, but like I'm ready now. So I just, like you said, a breath of relief.
Yeah. Eloy.
Yeah, so I can't sit still. We got the news in between, our short break between both shows, and I feel like I can finally be happy, if I'll just be honest. In the last few days, it's been so difficult to actually be able to sit in an emotion that isn't just anxiety and stress. I've been keeping my distance from being at the TV, watching every second and every minute of the broadcast, because my bandwidth is already stretched so thin. And I didn't want to be devastated, because it would, otherwise it would have been devastating for me, just full disclosure. And getting this news that Biden hit 284 is just so heartening, and it made me just so happy. I was moved to tears also, Shar, because it's a wonderful feeling, and I've learned so much about voter suppression and the things that have been done against just voting for generations, and that we've seen this year in this election. So I've really felt scared that people weren't going to be counted, that people were going to be afraid and not vote. People were going to, like we've spoken before, feel like their voice doesn't matter. And the opposite is true. So I'm just so happy. I can't sit still. I'm moved to emotion. And like Char's saying, I'm ready. I'm so
All right, Adrian, what's going on with you?
I'm in shock. I actually can't believe it. I don't know. It just doesn't feel real, because for me personally, the last 4 years have been really difficult. And in a lot of ways, I feel that it has to do with the current administration that we've been living in. I feel like my own safety has felt threatened, and it should never be that way. It shouldn't be that way for anyone. And like we talked about in, you know, the previous episode, how like working as a team, as humanity is so important. And I even expressed this, that it just felt so divided, and it felt so opposite of that. Like we weren't a team, we weren't a group that was working together. It was these multiple groups that were all working in some kind of competition, some kind of thing that just didn't feel cohesive. And so I'm now ready to hopefully have a leader who is going to listen to the call of all of the American people. And I you know, I plan to hold, you know, the same level of accountability to, you know, my future leaders as I do to the one that's in office right now, because, you know, no one, I I don't know. I'm like, I'm still in shock. Like I'm still in shock. It's like a struggle to grasp at words and process what's going on right now.
So, as the host of the broadcast, I have to make sure that I keep it together. But um, I can't find words. I just got a text from my brother. It's over. And I'm trying to take it all in. Like Shar, I want to make sure that whoever's in office is going to do the right thing for everybody. And like Shar, there were points on either side that I agreed with. There were points on either side that I did not agree with. For me, what was most important, and I think that President-elect Biden made this clear, was that it was about the soul of the nation. And some of the conversations that I've had with friends of the opposite persuasion of myself, and I'm not going to self-disclose because that's me, but I will say that the conversations that I've had with others, back to what we said in the last show, too often we were talking past each other. And as an individual, my integrity says that if the ends, regardless of how the ends are, how important the ends are, no means can justify the ends if it's not done with integrity. And there were too many times where I questioned the integrity of the means to justify the end. That being said, we do have a new president-elect, and I think it was either Eloy or Adrian that said we have to hold this president to the same standards that we would have held the previous president to, which means you don't get a pass just because you were overwhelmingly voted in, because you're going to come with a demeanor and tenor that is worthy of an American president. That cannot be the only reason that you are in office. We still expect you to do right by the humanity of the American people that you are now going to be governing. And so with that said, I think about where I'd like to take this conversation moving forward. Now that the elation has died down just a little bit, and we're thinking about, okay, what does this mean moving forward? As we look in the rear view mirror and don't have to worry about the land of Oz anymore, and, you know, pulling back the drapes to see what's really running the machine and looking forward down the yellow brick road, what do each of you see for yourselves as individuals when you think about race relations in America? Because again, I think that what we have just experienced over the last 4 years was always there. It's just people were emboldened. And now that we know what we're dealing with, what is that going to mean for us individually moving forward? So just to give you an example, I will start. I have changed the focus of my consulting practice to diversity, inclusion, and belonging, because I keep getting calls for that. And my approach to that is very different than approaches in the past. Approaches in the past, in my opinion, were focused more on shame and blame versus know and grow. And you can't get people to change how they show up if you're forever beating them about how they've been wrong and what they did wrong. And you can't, nobody's going to change like that. But if we move to raising awareness and remembering that who we are has been shaped by what we've been through. And if some people have only known their own circle growing up and not known anything different, it's kind of hard to blame them for the mindset that they have. However, as an adult, it's absolutely incumbent upon us to expand our thinking by expanding our exposure to different people. So for me, I see the way forward as an opportunity to help humanity engage as one, as we've all been saying around the room. So if that gives you an example of what I'm looking for as you're sharing with us what this new era is going to mean for you moving forward, who would like to jump in first?
Well, if I understand what you're saying correctly, personally, I feel like this has shed light on a lot of different things. One being, kind of what you're talking about in the sense of race relations. And I work in healthcare, and I work in a predominantly white environment. And this conversation has allowed me to talk openly, as opposed to feeling like I should be whispering, like this is a controversial topic, when it's like, no, we've been talking about this entire year. Mm-hmm. And now we have someone else in power. And my hope is that we go about things differently. And this puts me in a position to be able to organize these kind of conversations. I feel like it would be impactful to have some type of support group, some type of resource center within the job that I work, so that we can have this conversation in a safe environment, and we can implement change, and we can do things to make everyone feel inclusive. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that's my mark after we pass this baton along. So
I love what you just said about you feel like you no longer have to whisper, and that you can stand in your conviction and share your voice and amplify your voice and raise the volume on your voice because of what's just happened. Why is that? Why did you not feel you could do that previously?
Because we hadn't had that conversation, not on a global manner. It was still something that was swept under the rug. It felt like we did something about that. It's okay. We don't need to talk about it anymore. Mm-hmm. And it felt like, well, crime happens everywhere, and wrongful, accusations happen everywhere. So it almost seemed normal. And then the George Floyd movement happened, and it was like this hit to where it's not normal. And now everybody's talking about it. Whether you agree with it or not, it is a hot topic. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like, okay, you're already talking about this. Well, let me jump in. Let me, like you were saying, kind of amplify what I think and what I feel. And now we can have this conversation because everyone's talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Adrian, I think I want to come to you next. I know usually when I, go around the circle with the crew, I always save you for last, but I want to come to you next. What's coming up for you? You're on mute, sweetie pie. I know you didn't want us to hear you jumping up and down and doing cartwheels in the background, right?
Not at all. Anyway, so how I truly honestly feel, I am I'm looking forward to the strides that will continue to take place, and I'm just hoping for that positivity and for that growth in terms of race relations. I look forward to a day where this issue doesn't exist, and in the back of my mind, I can't help but still feel a sense of fear, simply because that's what we've been conditioned to feel, right? As just a people supporting one another. I am nervous for the reactions of, people who definitely don't feel the way we do about this election. I'm nervous for, there are extremists and there are people who feel completely opposite and, have said horrible things about, what could potentially happen due to the outcome of this election, and that they may act certain kinds of ways. And I'm nervous about that. And I know that's, within the near future. It may not last forever, but it's still, it's a concern for safety for so many people, and it just makes me want to implore, everybody to stay safe and to stay vigilant, because there are people that clearly don't feel the way that we do about this, and are not going to carry themselves and handle things the ways that a regular person should. And it's concerning, and it makes me just think about my friends and family and people who are at risk because simply of who they are. Um, so, as excited as I am, and as, you know, anticipatory I feel about what growth will continue to happen in the future, I can't help but still feel that sense of fear.
You know, what you have just said has triggered me in a couple of ways. First of all, you mentioned conditioning. And in the monologue that led up to these two podcasts, I talked about how we've been conditioned to see, or how we've been conditioned to think about what we should see, even though it might not be there. And then you talked about your concerns about moving forward. And even though it might be short lived, how might people respond? And that's been a concern of mine as well, regardless of how the election turned out. I was also concerned about, how are people going to react? How are they going to conduct themselves? What do we have to worry about? And so, like you, I'm concerned. So the election is over, but it's not the end, it's the beginning. And it's the beginning of how are we as humanity, as Americans living in the United States of America, seeing how the attitude and conditioning of the last 4 years has impacted people that may have surprised us, and some other people that, well, I saw that coming. It's just, what took them so long to like really show their true colors. Now we're right here. We're at a crossroads. What is that going to look like?
Yeah.
Eloy, what are your thoughts?
And I think, as we've mentioned before, the extremists, I'll use that word, were riled up, right, by the former president. And I think part of what will help to quell all of that anger and the way that those expressions are done will be to hear from our new president, from Biden. And because it does start, I do believe that in this nation, it does start at the top. So if he can find a way, which I think he will, especially with Vice President Harris, to bridge us again as a nation, as people of all different ideologies, then we can learn as a people to resolve what we're feeling, and, like Shar is saying, have these conversations and not act out in ways that have been, promoted for the last 4 years. I think that's part of, like you mentioned, you hit the nail right on the head. Our conditioning over the last 4 years has been use force, be aggressive, be outspoken, don't be respectful, don't come from a place of humanity. And now we have the ability to rectify that and to change that. And I do think that Biden and Harris are well informed enough to be able to do that, to bring us back as a nation to a place where we are thinking about the greater good for us all. And while it may take some time, I think that also what we're doing and what we have been doing is also modeling that behavior. Dr. A, you said, disagree, but don't be disagreeable. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And continuing to model that behavior, I think, is going to go a long way. Because if we can quell all of that, all of the extremist ideology, with just another way to say what you want to say and still get it out, then it won't be internalized. And hopefully those people won't feel like they have to use force. They can use their voice, because it matters just as much, like we've been saying over these weeks. So I really feel like we'll be able to now bring us back to a place where we can disagree without being disagreeable, where we realize that we don't have to use force and we don't have to start with aggression, because what we say matters, and we are going to be seen and we are going to be heard. And it's not like we're pushing everyone who didn't want Biden and Harris to win aside. That's not what we're doing. Now it's like, okay, now you come in. We don't call you out, we call you in, so that we can all be, you know, a unified nation, because we're stronger when we're unified. And we can understand each other when we're unified. I really, really would just love, and I think it will happen, for this divisiveness to just stop, honestly, just stop, so that we can be better, you know, really just be better individually, in our communities, in our workplaces, you know, in our education spaces, even if it is at home, because these microaggressions do still happen, so that we can get back to what matters. And I think what matters is the benefit for everyone, and not just the pockets of, well, who's winning right now, who got the most votes this year, who's going to be in charge these next 4 years, because what we do is going to impact us so much longer and past these 4 years.
I love what you just said about, we don't call out, we call in. We're not saying, okay, your team lost, so back up. We're not saying that. We're saying, let's bring us all back together wherever we can agree. And I think that's important. Going back to the theme, surviving the scene, we have seen what the last 4 years have brought us. We have seen how people's true colors have been flying high. We have seen the deterioration of trust in our nation. But now let's survey the scene, the SCENE, and where we situate ourselves now that we're going to be under a different type of administration. Again, remembering that both sides of the parties have human beings involved. And so with human beings on both sides, you're going to find liars, cheats, manipulation, and all that. So let's go into this wide-eyed and be clear and not think that, you know, it's the angels versus the devil, right? Let's just be real about that. You're still dealing with people. Can I get an amen, Walls, right? You're still dealing with people. So let's none of us confuse the fact that we have a different administration with it's all going to be pie in the sky. That's not the case. But when I talk about surveying the scene, SCENE, how do you think you will interact differently in the workplace based on how you are now showing up? And Sade, I go to you, and you're saying, now I have the confidence to speak because everybody's talking about it, versus how other people will show up. What are you thinking? And Shar, even though I used you first as an example, whoever wants to speak first, please feel free.
Can you just really quick, can you kind of reiterate the question? I'm not sure I understood 100%.
So now that we're talking about surviving the scene and what we could see and the changes in the nation and how people were, you know, really showing their true colors in their behavior and their talk, we saw that. Now we're surveying the scene, SCENE, and the landscape under a new administration. And so since we're surveying the scene, you had said that, you know, over the last few months, you have felt more empowered to speak your mind. How do you think that might be different based on the surveying the landscape or the scene at work now and how others might interact with you? Is that more clear? Okay.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I think in the beginning, I wanted to be convincing. I wanted to use my voice and I wanted you to hear what I had to say. Whereas going into this now, I feel like I'm going to be more mindful of those who wanted a different outcome. And I think my approach towards them is going to be more empathetic. I can understand being in your shoes, how things didn't go the way that you thought. And maybe that kind of makes you a bit nervous, a bit anxious now because things are out of your control. Well, hey, things went the way that I thought, but things are still out of my control too. So we can relate on that. So what can we focus on that's within our control? Regardless of what it is that we want to fight for, we can still come together. And I think that's what's changed. Is now I want the other side to join me, and I want both of our goals to be accomplished. This is no longer a versus.
I think that's admirable, but how likely is that? I'm just okay. Can we just keep it real for a minute? That's beautiful, but how likely is that when you think about what we have seen How likely is that?
It'll definitely be difficult. I think people will be in their feelings, and so they don't want to work together. They don't want to join. They don't want to acknowledge, yeah, I lost you one, but we're just going to work towards this. But I think so many things in life are slim to nothing. I think a lot of people didn't think we would be here with the results that we have. So I have to have faith that we'll get there. The door is open. I'm going to sit here. You want to have this conversation? Then let's have it. If you don't, if you're not ready, that's okay. But someone's going to be next to me. That's what this election has taught me. Somebody thinks the same way that I think. So we're not in this alone.
So until we can get to the point where, to Adrian's point, it's not about calling out, it's about calling in. Until you can get to the point where someone who is on the opposite side of the fence of you is willing to come in and heed your call to a conversation, what is that going to require of you?
Research. I need to know both sides. Just because I don't have the opposing party sitting across from me doesn't mean I shouldn't know what it is that they want, and doesn't mean I can't find a way to incorporate what I want. I can play both sides until I have someone sitting next to me, because that's my job, to be knowledgeable, to inform, to educate, to be willing to have the conversation, even if I'm, kind of interpreting it myself.
Okay. Eloy, I'm going to go to you next on this one. So Shar is assuming that people are going to be ready to have those conversations, but I'm not quite so sure. So how do we show up with the folks that were part of the other side with their flags? And I'm doing my best not to call names, but you know what I'm talking about. People that were really demonstrative in their feelings, as Shar put it, once people get out of their feelings, what do we do in the meantime until they can get out of their feelings and be willing to go, okay, let me go talk to Shar? How do I deal with Eloy?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to let them be in their feelings. Let them be in their feelings, because that will be a process. I'm also going to be comfortable and being confident. I'm going to interrupt you right there,
because what if allowing them to be in their feelings, and I absolutely hear you, but what if allowing them to be in their feelings has a negative impact on you?
Yes. So I want to think about this in a diplomatic way. I do my best to model communication. I'm studying communication. I love communication. And I've been in a place to where personally I can coalesce information that comes in and then bring it out in a way that's palatable. So I'm not afraid of those courageous conversations, of those complicated conversations. I also maintain my distance from having, disagreements and things, especially at work, because it's a professional setting. But being confident in myself and being able to respond with a not only neutralizing way to communicate, because after these 4 years, I'm triggered so not as much as I used to be, and I'm also a full disclosure person. And if there is this certain level that's coming at me, then I really have no problem flipping the script and having it just be, well, I had to put up for it for the last 4 years. So if you're going to be this base about it, then now it's your turn to learn how to cope in a way that isn't making the people around you uncomfortable. I understand you've had 4 years to make us all feel uncomfortable, to man spread and take up all the space. But if you're going to be this base about it, if we can't have a conversation that is diplomatic, then you can do that elsewhere.
Okay. All right.
That's how I feel about it. I'm always comfortable with a conversation that is complicated and courageous. I also do have a limit, and as a human, I do not need to be in a space where I'm verbally abused, where I'm made feel uncomfortable, where I'm made to have to make myself small. I've learned not to have to do that, and it's not like I'm going to meet force with force, but I will meet force with reason.
Okay. All right.
Reason. So, in letting them be in their feelings, that's fine. I'm also going to be confident in mine. If it's a base conversation, because it's really hard when conversations are really just kind of down in the gutter, for lack of better terms, to continue to engage with for me. So just put a pin in it, and especially at work, just keep on moving, honestly.
Okay. Adrian, I'm coming to you because I need you to help me because, Shar wants to have these deep conversations and Eloy wants to meet force with reason. And Adrian, for those who are not ready to meet with any reason, what are we going to do, my friend? Because it looks like me and you are going to have to roll with just the two of us because these two are still having these, intellectual conversations with folks that ain't ready for it. So Adrian, help me. It's me and you against the world. What are we going to do? See, Adrian's okay. My man. He's like, what can I pick up real quick to make my play? Roll with me, Adrian. Okay, let's go.
Hello, real quick. Oh my God. No, but I think that the way that people have carried themselves in relation to the president, people who follow him closely have used an amount of force that is beyond unacceptable in so many different circumstances, in so many different situations. Ideally, I want to say that, I like what Eloy said of meeting their force with reason, but and I see all these things. Like I see what Shar is saying and I see what Eloy is saying. And like I ideally feel that way too, because I would love for us to be able to have, a place where conversations like this can exist. I don't think it's going to happen soon, or maybe within the next 4 years, maybe within the next however many years. I'm not sure. I personally don't think it is going to happen anytime soon, because the way that they've handled themselves leading up to the election is in no way signaling to me that they're willing. And I'm not saying that like Sade or Eloy were saying like we're gonna have these conversations tomorrow, because that's definitely not. I don't think that's on the agenda for anybody right now. Mm-hmm. But I do think that is ideally the way to handle things. It's just right now there's so much like heat and so much simmering going on.
Yes.
And we need to think of a way to get to that place of conversation. What does that place look like? What does that middle ground, what is that like? Yeah. I'm not going to go out immediately today and, share my Biden pride. Because frankly, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want somebody to, do something. And unfortunately, that's a fear we have to live with. But I don't know. I don't want to meet like force with force, but in some instances, throughout history, it's shown that that's what needs to happen. I don't know, Dr. Nita, I need you to help me with this one because I'm feeling.
You are right on the money. You said it perfectly when you said, "What do we do with the space in between?" And that's where we are right now. We are let's have a thoughtful, intellectual, common sense conversation with Shar or Eloy. We're not there yet. We're at the space in between. And what I would like for you to do for me, Adrian, and this is not to put you on the spot, but when you say force, define that for me, because I'm sure you don't mean with clubs and knives and guns. Define that for me when you say meeting force with reason.
There is a sense of force that I believe people on the opposite side of us use, which is, a demonstrative force, which is, showing up in numbers, showing up on your street corners, rallying. And, in the same way, I feel like many of us showed up with that same kind of gathering, when protests were happening. Mm-hmm. I would not mind seeing more of that. I think that is really powerful. Mm-hmm. And, if anything, it really showed the power of us as Americans to gather together in the name of something that we believe in order to fight for something. And I think that kind of gathering is powerful. I mean, clearly these other people are adopting it as well to show what they believe. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to gather. I don't know if that's, the answer. I don't know if that's fully completely what needs to be done, but that's what I think of when I think of force.
Mhm.
You know, if we're talking about extremists, there are people that interpret that force differently, and it's unfortunate, and I wish that it wasn't that way, but they've, you know, discussed things like this leading up to this election. And so ideally, force is not going to involve like anything crazy. And I mean, like you said, I don't see myself going out with, you know, armed or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is force in terms of gathering as a community, force in terms of making our voices heard in ways that are meaningful but not violent.
What I hear in what you just described is force in terms of, like you said, rallying and gathering on street corners. When I think about people gathering in those numbers, force is with the intent to intimidate versus protest where people are gathering with the intent to influence.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the difference in the voices that I distinguish between the groups. So when we talk about meeting force versus reason, I see the force of intimidation versus the reason of influence.
Yeah.
And until we can both be meeting with reason versus reason, regardless of what your worldview is, if it's more about influence versus intimidation, that's where we can start to make the progress towards having those wonderful conversations with Shar and Eloy. Does that make sense, gang, or am I talking off the wall here?
No, that makes sense, and I can respect that kind of order, and I understand why it needs to happen in that order to get to a place where we could have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. So while I absolutely 100% support you, Sharday, and you are Eloy, I think Adrian gave us something insightful when he said we're at that space in the middle where we're not yet ready to engage like that. And obviously we're talking in generalities. Some people are, but when you consider what we've just gone through, it's going to take some time to get there. It's going to take some time. And so the question is, how are we prepared to deal with that space in the middle until we can get to that space where we can get back to effectively disagreeing without being disagreeable and without losing sight of the fact that we've got to do what's best for everybody. So your team was in power. It's our turn to be in power. But regardless of who might be in power after the next 4 years, how can we get back to doing what's best for the greater good? Which means sometimes I need to relinquish my right to be right versus my right to be whatever it needs to be for harmony. That's not to say that we just follow each other off the cliff. That's not what I'm saying at all. Am I being clear in what I'm saying? Somebody help me out and like maybe rephrase what it is that I'm trying to say for our audience.
I mean, I think part of it is, and I'm not sure if this will exactly answer your question, but it is a little tough in that I do want to go out with my Biden pride. I do want to go out with my Harris, shirt and express my elation at the fact that we won. I'll put it that way, the election at least, and that now it'll be different and, in my opinion, better days here in the nation. And I think that doing that is going to also show, well, obviously it's going to let the people around me know where I stand and how to engage, and if they can engage, and if they want to and they don't. So I think part of using that iconography will also, like Adrian is saying, can bring a certain level of like danger right my way, but it'll also let people know, hey, that's someone, that's a comrade of mine. That's someone I'm safe with as well. And as a queer male, I'm always at risk. So it's not like it's a space I haven't existed in all of my life. And I'm willing to be that beacon for other people around me to know, hey, I'm safe with that person too. I don't have to wonder or guess if I can say this or if, they're going to retort in a way that's going to be negative. I am comfortable being in that space. And I'll admit I'm more comfortable now with the election result than I was before. But I also think it's necessary. I do think some of us need to do that to allow other people the knowledge of who we are and where we stand. Dr. A, I don't think that was exactly what you were saying, but I did want to mention that because it is something on my mind, and it is something that I encourage other viewers and our listeners to do if they feel comfortable with it, having that self-awareness of the risk and where you are and who you're around. But I mean, I'm at risk anyway. So I'd rather be proud and at risk, or proud and letting other people know you don't have to be afraid and don't be afraid. And also allowing them the space to see themselves reflected in a way that is also positive. You know, I think it's really important to do that.
And the way you just put it is really encapsulating the theme of the month, surviving the scene, what we have seen, and surveying the scene, the environment that we're now stepping into. And Eloy, for you to say, I'm going to put on my shirt, knowing that, number one, I might be showing up as an ally for someone else. But number two, also very aware of the fact that I essentially possibly put a target on my back. That's the landscape that we're in right now. And we have to understand how to situate ourselves in the landscape, in the in-between time, as Adrian said, until the time that we can have those discussions that Sade and Eloy, I know, will have and represent and be welcoming. Back to Adrian's point, not to call out, but to call into the circle of discussion and into the circle of humanity that we know we can be. Wow, crew, this was an amazing discussion. I know that we're gonna hit the leave the meeting button and go crazy behind the scenes because we are ushering in a new era. I want to thank each and every one of my co-contributors, Sade Perry, Adrian Pastor, Eloy Garcia, for their courage to have this type of conversation in this current environment. I want to thank you all for always keeping it real. I want to thank you for allowing me to be a little provocative at times and push, but to know that it's with love and to make sure that we are bringing everything to the table and leaving it out here for our listeners to benefit from and make their own decisions. These podcasts are not to influence you one way or the other than to get you to expand your thinking and consider other points of view, not necessarily to adopt, but just to learn from and grow. And we all need to do that. I think it was Shar that said, I need to be educated. I need to know what the other side values so that I can have a good, welcoming conversation with them. And that is so true. We can't just go around saying, I don't agree with you and not know what it is that we don't agree with. Otherwise, we're just like the other side that we're claiming is off the wall. So with that being said, thank you for joining me for another nSanity Check. I am Dr. Anita Polite Wilson. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Dr. Anita PhD. That's DoctorAnita PhD. I hope you will check out our other podcasts. These are some amazing conversations, and none of this is scripted. This is for real, for real, for real. And stay with us for the next show when I have Dr. Julie Taylor join me. And we're going to discuss the hidden organizations in the workplace. Until then, please stay blessed and never, ever forget, never, ever be afraid to keep it real.